Evening, everybody. Welcome to the Chris Salcedo Show worldwide here on the VIDA Television Network. Glad you've tuned in tonight, folks. I'm going to take a little bit of a break from all of the sexual scandals up on Capitol Hill. We're going to cover it rather extensively in the second segment, but I thought I'd talk at least a little bit about some substantial things going on in your government that you really ought to know about. In particular, as it pertains to a government agency you probably don't know an awful lot about. So let's start there as we go to the social media contacts for the Chris Salcedo Show at Chris Salcedo TX on Twitter, at ChrisSalcedotX, or just go to chrissalcedo.com, leave a voicemail, and leave an email there, one or the other, both, if you'd like. I'm going to turn to Mick Mulvaney. Now, he is a man inside of the Trump administration. He is the current director of the Office of Management and Budget. And he held a press conference today talking about what he was going to be doing, or yesterday, I should say, about what he was going to be doing as he has been tapped to not only run OMB, the Office of Management and Budget, but also the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which was started under the Obama administration. Quickly, some background on that. Barack Obama founded this organization. Barack Obama unconstitutionally filled a position in this new protection bureau. This Consumer Financial Protection Bureau was staffed by a guy by the name of Richard Cordray, and he was appointed in a recess appointment by Barack Obama. Problem was, the Congress wasn't in recess, so Barack Obama violated the Constitution in getting this whole thing off the ground and getting it started. But the CFPB is scary. It is by far the most powerful agency in the federal government. It eclipses the power of the Internal Revenue Service, which ought to scare the living daylights out of everybody within the sound of my voice. Listen to what Mick Mulvaney says he wants to do now that he's there.
Anybody who thinks that a Trump administration CFPB would be the same as an Obama administration Trump CFPB is simply being naive. Elections have consequences at every agency, and that includes the CFPB.
Yeah, the CFPB. It needs to be reformed, ladies and gentlemen. It needs to be reformed big time. It needs to be gone. The entire agency is unconstitutional, and I'll get into that in the next soundbite with Mick Mulvaney here. He describes why the CFPB needs reform and where I believe the CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which is anything but, needs to go away. Listen.
My opinion of the structure of the CFPB has not changed. I still think it's an awful example of a bureaucracy that has gone wrong.
Yeah, by the way, Mick Mulvaney, when he was in Congress, was quoted as saying that something along the lines of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is a joke, is a stunning joke, and it is. And the problem is it exploits the American people and our taxpayer money, and we get no accountability. This is all going to be explained to you by Mick Mulvaney. Listen.
It is almost entirely unaccountable to the people that are supposed to oversee it or supposed to pay for it. I still have the same fundamental principled misgivings about the way this bureau is structured. I think it is wrong to have a completely unaccountable federal bureaucracy. I think it's completely wrong. By the way, I'm just learning about the powers that I have as acting director. They would frighten most of you.
I'm frightened. And you ought to be as well. Did you guys know the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, Barack Obama set it up to where it is not funded by the U.S. federal government? It is funded by the Federal Reserve. Your elected representative that you send up to Capitol Hill has no oversight ability over this agency. As a matter of fact, it is independent and runs roughshod over the Congress. It has been set apart to where if the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau targets you for whatever reason, whether you're a business or whether you're just a normal, everyday American, there is nobody you can go to for help. Nobody can hold this agency accountable. And that's how Barack Obama, Elizabeth Warren, and these extremist leftist progressives constructed it. So it would not be accountable, made up of nothing but left-wing bureaucrats.
They would probably worry you to think about how little oversight Congress has over me now as I'm the director, how little oversight the committees have over how CFPB functions.
It's stunning in its scope and what this agency can do. Ladies and gentlemen, this agency needs to be gone. And I would highly encourage everyone in the sound of my voice. Mick Mulvaney is going to try to rein it in, and hopefully Congress will get off the stick and actually do some work for a living and actually declare this institution unconstitutional, or at the very least, fund it through the normal financial channels, appropriations bills by the Congress of the United States, so you and I have at least the illusion of accountability. Right now, it answers to no one. And the president of the United States can fire the head of the CFPB only with cause. So I really, well, we're going to get more into this in greater detail tomorrow, but I wanted to talk a little bit about something else other than sexual scandals. One of the big sexual scandals surrounding this guy, that's Al Franken. He's a senator from Minnesota, and he stepped in front of the cameras and said this today about the accusations. Well, they're not accusations. He's admitted to wrongdoing. This is what he said about it.
I've let a lot of people down, people of Minnesota, my colleagues, my staff, my supporters, and everyone who has counted on me to be a champion for women. To all of you, I just want to again say I am sorry. I know there are no magic words that I can say to regain your trust, and I know that's going to take time. I'm ready to start that process, and it starts with going back to work today.
Yeah, back to work. I know he's admitted to wrongdoing, although he won't admit to exactly what wrong he did. So he's saying, "Oh, I'm taking full responsibility. I'm admitting wrongdoing." But when asked for specifics in this press conference, he couldn't tell folks what he was apologizing for. Franken said there's no magic word he could use that would make this all go away. I can think of one, actually 2 words: I resign. He's not going to do that because he, like most liberal progressives, believes he's entitled to that seat and should not be held accountable. He was asked about that.
I will be open to that. That's going to be, of course, the ethic. I've not worked with the ethics committee before.
Yeah, he was asked, will you make the ethics committee findings public?
And I don't quite know how that works, but I'm certainly open to that. And I also, I'm going to try to learn from my mistakes. And
learn from my mistakes. What were those mistakes again? What Mr. Franken didn't say that. Learn from. So Mr. Franken is accused of not only forcibly putting his tongue down a woman's throat against her will, he's also accused of groping, pinching women on their heinies without their consent, posing for pictures and then grabbing them. A man his age doesn't know that's wrong.
In doing so, I've been doing a lot of reflecting, and I want to be someone who adds something to this conversation, and I hope I can do that.
Senator Al Franken, with all of this mamby-pamby psychobabble, oh, I'm learning it's wrong to touch women on their bum-bums. Much more on this coming up next. Salcedo Show here on the VIDA Television Network. All right, welcome back, everybody. The Chris Salcedo Show worldwide here on the VIDA Television Network. Lady over my right shoulder. That is an old friend of the program, Megan Barth. ReaganBabe.com. Used to be ReaganBaby.com, but she changed it up. Now, you know what? I never asked you. I mean, while we're on the topic, I never asked you why you changed it. Why did you go from Reagan Baby to Reagan Babe?
Well, I didn't have a choice. I had trademarked Reagan Baby, and the Reagan Legacy Foundation lawyers did not like that too much. So they challenged the trademark, which I dropped. And then 6 months later, they called me out of the blue and said, we're still really having a problem with your website. I said, okay, well, send me everything in writing, and I'll be happy to talk about it with you. And they never did. They actually used a 10-year-old email address through ICANN to serve me those papers and that notice, and then they wanted default judgment and seized my domain.
Wow. That's well, boy, that's a whole story behind that. We could do a whole show on that. I mean, and you know what? Yes. And of course, Reagan Baby, I'm a Reagan baby. A lot of folks who came of age during the Reagan era, responsible for the rebirth of conservatism in my mind. So maybe you and I will do a show on that in the future. Hey.
Yes, I've evolved. Like Democrats always like to use that word evolved. So I've evolved into a Reagan babe from a Reagan baby. But we all can identify with that, right? Just like you said, there's a generation of us that remember when character was king, that remembered when the Republican Party stood for something instead of stood with Democrats. They actually stood for limited government, lower taxation, secure borders, individual liberty and responsibility. Now what we have since Read My Lips is a party run by moderates. And I contend when George H. Bush, now the oldest living president, said, read my lips, that's when the party of Reagan died, because the moderates hijacked the party and became really a party of nothing. I mean, it was big government, it was big spending, it was high taxation in order to support this big spending, and it was basically open borders.
And it's so funny you bring up George H.W. Bush, because that's a perfect transition into what you and I brought you on to talk about, which is this spate of sexual misconduct allegations, not only hitting Hollywood, but also hitting Capitol Hill. The aforementioned George H.W. Bush has been accused by a 16-year-old of unwanted touching on her buttocks, and the former president has been accused of, and she's I think the second or the third accuser in this regard. As a woman, and not that I'm not qualified as a guy to talk about this kind of stuff, because that's all we've been talking about, it seems, for the last couple of weeks. But from a female perspective, what is your take on this avalanche of revelations?
Well, I have a perspective. I watched Bill Clinton be protected by the press. I watched Bill Clinton be protected by NOW and other feminist organizations. I watched him be protected by his wife. And then I also watched his wife and the feminists and other organizations like the press attack and destroy Bill Clinton's accusers. So it is my opinion, and based on one from my experience, that there is a generation of women that were silenced by the actions of Hillary Clinton. I mean, I remember wondering, where is now? Where is this women's group that's supposed to protect these women, these many, many women that were coming forward against Bill Clinton? And instead, what I witnessed was them being called bimbos. They were bimbo eruptions. They were trailer trash. They were Looney Tunes. They were narcissistic. They were crazy. And so I think that when you protect depravity, when you protect lawlessness, you actually elevate depravity and lawlessness. You invite more of it. And so I think that when Bill Clinton got away with the many cases of sexual harassment and assault, and basically just skated through the allegations with a slap on the wrist for lying to Congress, and that's why he was impeached. He wasn't impeached or held accountable for any of the dozens of acts or allegations that he was accused of. He was simply held accountable for lying. If we never would have found, if Monica Lewinsky never would have held that blue dress, Bill Clinton would have gotten away with everything, including lying. And so when we watched powerful women destroy other victims that came forward, I think that there was a generation of silence. Yeah, I know it impacted me.
And it wasn't only turning on women. It was only they will support women who accuse individuals of rape or misconduct, so long as the allegations are leveled at Republicans. But these Nancy Pelosi, speaking of Bill Clinton, she was out on Meet the Press just this last weekend. We made fun of her because they had some old tape with her and Tim Russert saying, why all the silence? And Nancy Pelosi was saying, the American women are really concerned about is unlimited power going after a sitting president. That's what she said back in the 90s, 1998 to Tim Russert. And then Chuck Todd asks her today about Franken, about Conyers, and she still won't commit to believing the women. The only time the Democrats want to believe women accusers is if they happen to be accusing Roy Moore or Republicans.
Or then candidate Donald Trump. They'll believe Gloria Allred's bimbo eruptions, but they won't certainly believe any of their own. When the arrows are lined up against their big donors like Harvey Weinstein, he's not a seated member of Congress, but he's a very powerful Democrat man. Allegations of Kevin Spacey, as far as pedophilia is concerned, he just goes to sex therapy camp down in some Tony place in Arizona, and then all is right with the world and forgotten. But we literally have photographic evidence against a seated senator by the name of Al Franken, who is groping a woman who is sleeping, which is no better. She did not give consent. We have multiple allegations against a seated Senator Bob Menendez that he practiced pedophilia in the engagement of human trafficking, must I also say. If he was working with Dominican prostitutes, underage prostitutes, that's a part of human trafficking. We don't associate child molestation with a seated senator, a Democrat by the name of Bob Menendez. Why? Because Democrats continue to protect their own political perverts. And this is evident that they have a $17 million slush fund that they've used over 10 to 15 years and have paid off over 260 cases of sexual assault and harassment and other charges that have been levied against seated congressmen on both sides of the aisle. And the fact is, Chris, we will never know who these congressmen are because of the reciprocal NDA. We don't know if some of them are sitting on the Senate Ethics Committee that are certainly going to be in charge now of passing whatever type of judgment against Conyers and Al Franken. We don't know if Al Franken has paid off his victims from this slush fund. And that's really how we need to put political pressure on the leadership. You saw dozens of Republicans and dozens of Democrats come forward demanding that Roy Moore step aside and get out of the race. You haven't heard a peep from either Republicans or Democrats demanding the resignation of Bob Menendez, Al Franken, and John Conyers.
No, you're absolutely right. And you took me right where I wanted to go. Megan Barth is our guest right now, folks, from ReaganBabe.com. And this brings us full circle to where we started our conversation about the limp-wristed, lackluster Republican Party, which has not been an opposition party to the Democrat Party for a good many decades, I'd rationalize. And who is protecting those individuals? You mentioned the NDA, not the National Defense Authorization, folks. This is the non-disclosure agreements. We, the taxpayers, paid these monies to an undisclosed number of sitting elected officials. We don't know who they are. We don't know their names because there was an NDA, and Nancy Pelosi laughingly over the weekend said these NDAs were there to protect the victims. Right. Nobody believes that, number one. But number two, we paid out the money, that the American taxpayers paid the money, and I don't remember signing a non-disclosure agreement. I know you don't remember signing a non-disclosure agreement, and we were the party that paid out for these individuals. So I don't buy for a second that we can't know the identities of these individuals. But you know who's protecting them? Mitch McConnell, Paul Ryan, Nancy Pelosi, and Chuck Schumer. This is a system that was set up to protect the powerful from accountability for their actions. And Megan, they're using our money to pay off and silence this hush money to these individuals. It's wrong.
It's absolutely wrong. And most of those women that had filed charges that were paid and then silenced through the NDA, many of them lost their jobs, lost their careers. That's what happens to sexual harassment accusers, is usually if you accuse, and let's just back up for a second. Sexual harassment is about power. It is not about sex. So it is using the power of your office or your position over a subordinate. This happens in the workplace quite often, whether it is in Hollywood or whether it is in the halls of Congress. We cannot have two separate laws or two separate actions or laws depending on your political posturing or your political power. There needs to be a level playing field when it comes to the exposing of these harassers who still might be in charge of making laws for the rest of us. And I find it highly unusual, but there is a pattern. When people have a pattern of this type of predatory behavior, they put themselves close to their victims. They are the champions of women. They are always leading the cause about women's rights. They are always alongside the feminists because then they are closer to their prey. And we as taxpayers should not allow this predatory behavior to go unnoticed, unnamed, and covered up, specifically when we, like you said, and evidence shows that we're paying for the cover-up.
Senator Al Franken came out just yesterday in a press conference where he said, basically, I'm not going anywhere. I'm really sorry that these women felt upset by what I had done. And he said it's the, in the Stuart Smalley way that he does it. I'm learning. I'm however old this guy is, 60, 70 years old. And he's learning that unwanted touching of a woman's body is wrong. He's learning that right now, but we're all supposed to forgive and just let it go. And it seems that Nancy Pelosi and a lot of liberal Democrat women who are in Congress, who are not openly calling for these guys to be, given the Roy Moore standard, which is expelled from Congress, they're hypocrites, yes?
Well, actually, you hear Nancy Pelosi on Meet the Press this past week and saying, they're just allegations. We have something called due process. We need to go through the system for due process. It's amazing how they embrace the Constitution when it comes to the protection of serial predators. And speaking of predatory behavior, there is always a pattern. John Conyers has a pattern with the multiple women that have come forward. Al Franken has a pattern, specifically in his misogynistic comedic routine where he jokes about drugging Leslie Stahl and raping her. And then we have many women that have come forward and said, hey, when I got a picture with him, he liked to grab my buttocks. And that happened time and time again. And so we have a predatory behavior over decades, right? Whereas Roy Moore, we have a few accusers that come 40 years later, but nothing in the 40 years has shown him to demonstrate any sort of predatory behavior. There is no pattern with Roy Moore. The only pattern with Roy Moore is the pattern that the elected officials, the Republicans and the Democrats, rose in unison, working across the aisles to demand that he step down. Well, I wish they would find that spine when it came to their own predators that are walking the halls of Congress that we are paying for the cover-up for. We're going to wait a very long time for Nancy Pelosi not to practice double standards, because that's exactly who the Democrat Party is hypocrites. They protect their own, just like they did Bill Clinton, and they basically character assassinate anyone who demands equal justice under the rule of law.
Megan Barth, our guest right now, ReaganBabe.com, folks. And you know what? We have called on the show on McConnell, Schumer, Pelosi, and Ryan to release the names of those individuals, past and present, who have had payouts courtesy of the taxpayers to accusers of sexual abuse, and to apply the Roy Moore standard to them and expel them from Congress, because that's what they're saying. Accusations are enough. If Roy Moore is fortunate enough to win his election, and he goes up to the Senate, they're going to expel him, and we think that type of treatment should be meted out to everyone else in that Congress who is accused. You mentioned something earlier. I don't know if I heard you correctly. It might have been our connection. Did you say that you have experienced something like this, some type of harassment in the past?
Absolutely.
How did that happen? What were the circumstances?
Well, numerous times. I mean, when I started out in the workforce, I was 21, 22 years old. I saw men and women in positions of power have affairs, cover up the affairs. So who am I supposed to go to when human resources directors are sleeping with vice presidents and they're both married? This happens time and time again in a corporate culture. Unfortunately, a corporate culture back in the day that really kind of was loose and free with their human resource policies. Now I don't think that many corporations could get away with that. However, when I had enough sexual harassment, I actually did something about it. I'm under an NDA, so I can't speak of it. But I can tell you that the empowerment that came through me pursuing my allegations in a court of law really rectified my life, rectified the behavior. But I can say is that I'm the one that was let go, and the harasser was promoted. This happens time and time again. This sexual harassment is nothing new. But the difference is there were a generation of women who were led to believe that sexual harassment was a right-wing conspiracy. And if you came forward, you would be publicly humiliated by those in power.
Last thing, there's the pendulum problem that a lot of people have observed that accusations are enough these days, and a lot of the folks have earned it, Weinstein and others. Are you concerned at all that once it is determined this is an effective weapon and that no burden of proof is needed to ruin somebody's life, whether it be sexual abuse or sexual misconduct or harassment leveled at men or women, are you worried that the overreaction in the society is going to lead to the weaponization of this?
Oh, absolutely, because as soon as I saw the Republicans wave the white flag of surrender in front of Gloria Allred, I said, great, so any conservative candidate that we want to run in any statewide race is going to have to step out for allegations? Are you serious? This is a weapon. It's already been used by Gloria Allred. They tried to use it against Donald Trump by digging up old allegations when he was on the campaign trail at the 9th or 11th hour of his campaign. They did the same to Roy Moore. They are going to use this as a weapon if it works. But now we have Nancy Pelosi that's changing the story, that says allegations are simply just allegations and they must be vetted through a court process and they are allowed due process. I'm a huge constitutionalist, as you are, Chris. I believe in due process. The Me Too movement, what I'm concerned about is that there are going to be a lot of copycat Me Toos for the fame, the fortune, or perhaps the payout. Let's not forget that Rolling Stone ran with the Jane Doe story, and she had accused a whole entire fraternity on the UVA campus of rape, which turned out to be based in zero fact, no truth to her allegations whatsoever. However, the fraternity had to go through the whole Title IX. They lost their chapter. They ended up suing for defamation, thank God. Then we had another woman who came forward in Colombia who carried a mattress around her back saying that she had been date raped. She was given all the fame and the glory and the fortune. She was exposed in the press and how brave she was, and carrying a mattress around on her back in Colombia never happened. So we have to be careful of the wolves that are crying wolf, and we have to make sure that there is due process based on these allegations, because not every allegation is true. Should it be believed? Sure, but the truth is vetted out in the court of law and through a discovery process.
Yeah, and you spoke of the abuse of the Me Too movement. Alyssa Milano the actress Alyssa Milano using the Me Too movement to decry tax reform. Believe it or not, the war on women accusation is being leveled by Alyssa Milano about taxes. We'll have to leave it there. Megan Barth, everybody, ReaganBabe.com. ReaganBabe.com. Lady, always a pleasure.
Hey, thanks a lot, Chris. Appreciate it. Congratulations on your new show.
And that there is going to do it for the Chris Salcedo Show worldwide here on the VIDA Television Network. Get in touch with the show. Leave your comments or concerns. ChrisSalcedo.com. ChrisSalcedo.com. Voicemail or email there. Or you can just get instantaneous feedback on Twitter at Chris Salcedo TX. Catch you tomorrow night, Chris Salcedo Show worldwide here on the VIDA Television Network.